As of this recording, it's been 76 days since the Gaza ceasefire had started. That's the good news. The bad news is that 65 of those amassed 900 violations, all of which led to the killing of 400 people in Gaza. And all credit goes to the genocidal state of Israel, of course. Anyway, you probably know all this already, so what this video is going to do is a little different. This video originally stemmed from my chagrin from all the leftists who stopped talking about this, so as a response to all of them, I decided to make a video that explains why you should not stop talking about the ongoing Gaza genocide. I will go through every single point of the ceasefire, but my main goal will be to prime and prepare your rhetoric so we can all silence the criticism. To start this off, I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm TJ, and believe it or not, I think it's okay to cry when you see a child running away from terror drones and terror airstrikes. Keep that image in mind for my post-ceasefire catch-up. Now, all that yapping aside, the newest Gaza ceasefire has 20 points in its latest iteration, the first of which says 1. Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Now, for how short this is, this response is gonna be pretty long. The very first point of the ceasefire, as you would guess, decides to only mention the military insurgency within the open-air prison. On the other hand, they completely ignore the one country broken out of nuclear weapon pacts, the same country that has killed a minimum of 71,000, a third of which are children, injured 172,000, handcrafted famine to over 500,000, constantly committed acts of terrorism according to the US and EU definitions of the word, is a US eligible terror threat even to its closest allies according to said definitions, and is accused of attacking international civilians by using terror drones.
Israel is attacking Syria. Israel is attacking Lebanon. Israel is attacking Tunisia.
See, you just don't understand how dangerous a child throwing rocks at a tank can be, so we have to treat that world-ending threat using our patented terrorist drones, all done via and due to and thanks to the still unmentioned threat to every journalist and whistleblower by way of cybersecurity invasions and malware. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the genocidal state of Israel. This very first point should give you an idea of the way the power dynamic works against the Palestinians. Now, going back to the breakdown, we have one other country bordering Gaza, that being Egypt. And when you have neighbors in plural, you think that Hamas ever caused a threat to Egypt. But the reality is that 0 threats, as far as I can confirm, have been guaranteed to be out of Hamas, and any other entity is not accounted for here in this ceasefire because the raison de guerre is that Hamas attacked in one specific instance, the genocidal state of Israel, and it's always been Hamas this, Hamas that. You get the point. It's not about the minor groups supporting the Bedouin in Egypt, but Hamas. Egypt has no say in this ceasefire, and it's not like their veto would have stopped the ceasefire from coming through, so this is entirely referencing Hamas. Keep that in mind. Now, with the established understanding that Hamas is seemingly only a threat to one entity, why threaten that one entity? The reality is that this conflict is over 80 years old, and I generalize this because it's not always important to reference the past when you have a goldmine of materials against that genocidal state in the present that anyone can see. The threat to that genocidal state starts with a basic fact. See, when a foreign entity invades your region and is actively working towards removing you, such a situation can create what is called an armed resistance, a form of resistance that follows some non-violent resistances and is an internationally recognized right for every group when necessary. The largest form of this armed resistance that is internationally recognized in modern time for Palestine is called Hamas. This entity, Hamas, and the genocidal state of Israel are the ones who signed into this ceasefire. We can extend the previous argument a bit further though. See, since international law exists, the reality is that this genocidal state of Israel has only 2 options to choose from. The first is saying that Gazans are in fact not sovereign and are not allowed to have any human or international rights. They can be killed at will and their death can be viewed live to anyone willing to view it live for free. And said genocidal state gets to control every facet of their existence, thereby refuting them any privilege or sense of independence they could even imagine to have. All that combined in a way proves that this genocidal state of Israel is using the Rome Statute as a sort of 101 in genocide. Option B, on the other hand, is for the genocidal state of Israel to admit that Palestinians have an internationally recognized right of self-defense, and therefore should put every war criminal on its side on international trials for punishing the armed resistance seeking salvation, which is recognized as an international right. The reality is that the word terrorism, and terror by extension, is facing a dilemma here when you mention it only with Hamas and ignore the prevalent terrorism of the genocidal state of Israel. In a purely technical sense, terrorism means using violence against civilians and causing fear among them for political goals or ends. This is an all-or-nothing statement. You can't pick and choose who is a terrorist and who is not if you adapt those specific wordings as meaning terrorism. If one country commits to calling one entity a terrorist machine without applying the same logic to everyone equally, that is more likely a form of racism or supremacism that undermines the use of the word because of that preferential treatment. It sort of turns the word into more of a political grunt that sounds negative in a specific direction. For now, let me have this last bit on this point. Let's just simply accept the argument that some would make about Hamas being the cause of terrorism in Gaza. I have to say this: you seem to be believing in either one of two things. If you think that Hamas is somehow terrorizing an enemy who is an invader in a war, like some sort of bizarre Schrodinger's war and Schrodinger's terrorism, without even understanding neither words, you are ridiculous. However, you could also be on the second option, where you believe Hamas is doing terrorist acts within Gaza, on Gazans, or on Hamas itself. And if you do believe that, I have to ask you this: who is the de facto ruler of Gaza? Well, it is Hamas as of right now, and the thing is, any violent act that you commit on a section of your people would be, I don't know, an element of a dictatorship, a crackdown, oppression, authoritarianism. There's really a lot of words that describe this, but no one uses the word terrorism, except for you. Like, just go check your own local police records and look up how many times they call themselves terrorists. If you think Hamas is committing self-terrorism and you think your police are terrorists, well, I'll have to admit that you're at least consistent on one thing, finally, but you're unfortunately still ridiculous, because self-terrorism is not real. Point number 2. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. You know, while I agree with the last part, the first one I'll have to unfortunately push back to points 9, 10 and 11 for my argument to make sense. Number 3. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will end immediately. The GIDF will withdraw to the agreed-upon line to prepare for a hostage release, and during this time all military operations will cease. So I can't comment on an if statement like the one at the start, but for the middle part of this, it's a lie, since a core tenet of the ceasefire has been brazenly violated about 900 times. And for the last part, this deal hasn't stopped the apartheid state from extending or melting the battle lines using the terrorist airstrikes, because they're special like that. On that topic though, I should also mention that there has been reports of continued destruction of the infrastructure by the genocidal state soldiers, because they're not like other girls. They're special. Oh, I should also probably mention that they ran over a living child with a bulldozer after the ceasefire was announced. But what else do you expect out of a ceasefire? The main point I'm making is this. This is how the genocidal state of Israel conducts peace. This is its peace. If any of us Zionists come up to you and says our country is peaceful, just show them one of the 100 headlines I'll share with you next video, or some of the ones here, and tell them this is the abhorrent violence of our country. Number 4. Within 72 hours of the genocidal state publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Yeah, so that doesn't really work when there's millions of tons of rubble to clear, huh? That really requires no sourcing when you can look at any satellite image of Gaza right now. To give you a more exact number though, it is 60 billion kilograms of rubble. The living hostages all got back as of right now, so any and every act of terrorism that genocidal state commits in their name is actually done in the name of one singular corpse that is left. And the fact is, they have punished people for the corpses, so... Number 5. Once all hostages are released, genocidal state of Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1700 Gazans who were detained after 7th October, including all women and children detained in that context. For every hostage whose remains are released, the genocidal state of Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. They just freaking admit it. Where's the call for the release of all the Palestinian hostages, huh? Those are 2,000 out of 11,000 in their prisons. And an even more realistic fact is that only about 10% of that number are serving actual sentences in a country that has all the reason to convict them of anything. So it's highly likely that there are over 10,000 Palestinian hostages in the genocidal state's prisons, being subjected to things I can't probably even describe in this video. Honestly, you're free to read this in your own spare time, but I have to maintain a level of positivity in this video, so here's a picture of a cute puppy. Number 6. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Yeah, I'm sure America or Germany are gonna accept a former Hamas member. Yeah. I'm sorry, but is there any sane human on this planet who thinks the genocidal state of Israel will see any Gazan, let alone an adult Gazan, and let alone an adult male, and let alone a former Hamas member, and they wouldn't kill that person on sight? Actually wait, I stand corrected. They don't distinguish between man, woman, and child. Number 7. Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the 19th January 2025 agreement. Yeah, so that didn't happen as of this upload, and it is a very massive failure at that so far. Now, I would have loved to give the UN some benefit of the doubt here, but the reality is that the difference between IPC4 and IPC5 is not that significant to where it warrants such a pro-genocide title. The world needs to change its tone massively, hence why I dedicated so much time for that at the beginning. Even you as a potential opponent to genocide, even you need to be primed for rejecting these kinds of horrendous phrasings. Number 8. Entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties, through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the 19th January 2025 agreement. The fact of the matter is, only one party has a fake aid program, and it's called the GHF. And it is in fact a death trap created by the genocidal state of Israel. As for the last part, the Rafah crossing is still not opened, so yeah, that never happened. But for a second there was a plan for it, but it was for the goal of ethnic cleansing. Okay, next one is kinda long, so we'll explain it as we go. Number 9. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee. Wait, how are politicians going to be non-political? Actually, forget that. Are we really about to put puppet actors in whatever position of power they'll think they'll have? Responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza, this committee will be made up of qualified Palestinian and international experts with oversight and supervision by new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by Trump. If the dude's willing to scam his own people with 3 presidential crypto scams, you can be very sure he'll treat brown people in their own country different. With other members including Tony Blair, I'll talk about this monster in a few, this body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such a time as Palestinians Authority has completed its reform program as outlined in various proposals, including Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take control of Gaza. So, aside from this weird vagueness that implies there is never gonna be enough proposals for the Palestinians to follow, is anyone able to control their own property against an invader who has tanks and aircraft if all they have are sticks and stones? There will never be sovereignty in Gaza if this happens, and it's really all hinging on this demand for disarmament. This body will call on the best standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment, aka rich white dudes will come in and enslave the Palestinians for quite honestly nothing, since they'll have no weapons to defend themselves with, and the rich will perform capitalism and erect tax havens. We'll get into this now. Number 10. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East, aka the UAE that has helped fund part of the Sudan genocide and famine, or possibly Saudi Arabia, the main force of evil in so many areas, or possibly genocidal state of Israel itself, who has all the interest in destroying Gaza. Those role models that totally aren't reliant on oil and gas and what does genocidal state of Israel even rely on? Foreign aid from America? I'll get into this in a future video. But many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development plans ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunities, and hope for future Gaza. Okay, we can have the talk now. First of all, why does this sound like a parent assuring their child that the boogeyman doesn't exist? Second of all, this international modifier they're using could mean a lot of things. It could be that the UN is involved, it could be that the World Bank is involved, and we all know how that makes you a slave to capitalism. It could involve the international tie of America and the genocidal state of Israel only, and so whatever they see fit, like a genocide could happen. It could mean quote-unquote international think tanks like, you guessed it, the Tony Blair Institute, and that's not even a start to how bad of a news that actually is. I'm not even kidding when I say he has more red flags than a ski race. Take that imagery as you will. It could be the Boston Consultancy Group. Yes, that same group that was part of the idea of expelling all Gazans to build Trump's Disneyland. I mean, let's be even realer here. You and I could make an international group comprised of 2 people and join in on the fun of ethnic cleansing and new slavery. Also, yes, the jobs of earning $100 a month like the rest of the imperialized people outside the West. In fact, I think my previous statements were actually overtly positive, so let me fix that. With the ultra-wealthy having offshore tax havens and the ability to enslave 2 million people that are desperate and unarmed in various ways, who needs to give these enslaved people money anyway? Did you know that you can feed someone for an entire day using $1? Yeah, subsidized maize and fortified porridge to everyone it is. And you thought that Koreans have no say in their diet is bad enough, at least they get to eat vegetables. All we need is like an internal police force to make sure no one steals the products, and it'll be the Warsaw Ghettos all over again. Except a little worse because the billionaires are involved, and actually it is made to last. Alright, that genocidal state of Israel already has tried to create a Warsaw Ghetto. Number 11. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariffs and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. Which is basically a special economic zone or a free trade zone or a reduced taxes zone or whatever you want to call it. Or it's like basically a sort of prototype for manually building your own tax haven for the ultra wealthy so that they can transport their wealth somewhere else when the taxes get too high or the workers go too bye-bye. But unfortunately there's no bye-bye for Gazans as we saw before. Yeah, these free trade zones are kinda funny at times. Number 12. No one will be forced to leave Gaza. And those who wish to leave will be free to leave and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them opportunities to build a better Gaza. Yeah, I'm sure you want the free forced labor to stay, I'm sure of that. There was news that the abhorrent state has allowed 200 to leave, but we'll see if they ever return. I got another long one here, so let's go bit by bit. Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. Now, I won't go over Hamas, but they have in fact taken a legitimate political win in the 25th of January 2006. A sincere governance by someone in Gaza will effectively lead to a new Hamas, the anti-occupation resistance of Hamas. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. I'll give you one better. How about we have the genocidal state of Israel destroy its own terror infrastructures as well? I think that's fair. And yes, that includes all the terrorist states' nuclear weapons, of course, because it's not allowed to have that. And the main tool that made the Cold War cold shouldn't be one-sided, otherwise that's just a hot war on a button that's being waved in front of you, aka terror infrastructure. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of an independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed-upon process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. Well, first time I hear of a freaking reintegration program for weapons. Anyway, New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to a peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. So 2 things. Like I said before, they don't expect Gaza to have military sovereignty or the ability to defend itself. And why is that? Well, I could never tell, but I imagine it's so that one terrorist settler can go and do terrorism on 1.5 million people with a sledgehammer. Second point is, as I said before, it's not neighbors, but neighbor. Stop straddling Egypt into this. Number 14. A guarantee will be provided by the regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations and that the new Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its people. If we want no threat to Gazans, we should put every war criminals from a certain sledgehammering state in prison. Honestly, the more I read this, the more I realize that factions here means the factions of Hamas, and not that ISIS-linked group that is causing most of the issues with Egypt and within the Gaza Strip, and is also funded by the genocidal state of Israel. You know, maybe you can have genocidal state of Israel stop funding terrorism in Gaza if you want Gazans to be safe. And also, let me just point out that according to B'Tselem, the amount of judicial killings in Gaza committed by Hamas is 59. And if you add the 32 that are part of a gang that were recently killed in a spat of violence, we have a total of 91 deaths by political violence made by Hamas on Gazans, as far as I know, since its inception, and potentially more that I missed, but we'll work with this. Whereas that horrendous state has killed 67 people between the Al Talina massacres and the Kafr Qasim massacre alone, in comparison to like 10 events on the other side in the span of 20 years in comparison to our 10 years. Also, let's be realistic. No regional entity is willing to fight Hamas because they have the brain cells to recognize that Hamas doesn't see them as an enemy. Number 15. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force to immediately deploy in Gaza. That still didn't happen after 2 months. The ISF will train and provide support to a vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt who have extensive experience in this field. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with genocidal state of Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas, along with newly trained Palestinian forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate a rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. This is just empty promises. Number 16. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. That is just straight up verifiably and objectively false. As the ISF establishes control and stability, the GIDF will withdraw based upon standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to the demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the GIDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to genocidal state of Israel, Egypt for some reason, or its citizens, and we debunked both of the last ones. So basically this is just saying that the quote-unquote temporary and phantom-like force that has so far been very successfully implemented, by the way, will bend over backwards to every enemy Gaza ever knew and didn't know if they even had with those guarantors. Practically, the GIDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF according to an agreement they will make with the transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. Ah yes, we are gonna let them withdraw, but we are also gonna let them stay. Interesting vagueness there. Also yes, the resurgent terror threat of people wanting to fish in their waters without being sniped, or you know, the terror threat that is actually 2 terror threats and you get to neutralize both terror threats with 1 bullet and then make a shirt about it. I don't know, like especially with these later points, you're gonna not find a lot of things you can argue for or against just because it's a lot of vague promises. Anyway, number 17. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. Do you really think that genocidal state of Israel will not continue the genocide in the case Hamas rejects even a single letter of the ceasefire? Are we really that depraved after an entire genocide happened right in front of us? Number 18. An interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance as peaceful coexistence. Okay, so this is something that annoys me about this whole occupation. They keep framing this resistance to an occupation as if it's a religious pact instead of the reality that it's an occupation and a genocide that the people have to defend themselves from. Also, if this is going to be a re-education project for Gazans, you have to go re-educate the citizens under the genocidal state of Israel first. They're the ones who have a statistically higher amount of violent thoughts and selfish thoughts. I'll let the data speak for itself on these demographics, whereas if you compare this to Palestine, it shows that only 36% see combat as the best answer to the occupation and genocide and ethnic cleansing they suffered through for nearly a century. To try and change mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. Again, it's not the Palestinians that need this education or whatever you want to call this future re-education camp. Number 19. While the Gaza redevelopment plan advances and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Oh my god. So, first of all, the Palestinians have agreed on multiple occasions that they will accept a two-state solution, but it's
genocidal state of
Israel that always rejects that. And for a second, when we focus on this point, you recognize that Palestinians want that, but then you have a two-pronged approach to them. The first is to not allow them to even have self-determination, a very key part of which is having a military infrastructure, and then the other prong is not recognizing why the Palestinians are even putting up this fight. If this were you right there, would you not want anything in life? Just some tiny bit of dignity, a tiny bit of stability, a bit of food maybe, a home safe from all the floods maybe. Number 20. The United States will establish a dialogue between
genocidal state of
Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. Yes, just like they did for the past 80 years where one side is completely silent and the other side gets to say and make all it wants at the price of that other silent majority. I would genuinely hope peace is an option, but it's the genocidal state of Israel that's the issue with that. Prosperity is not a real word under capitalism, especially not when 100% of Gaza will be the working class under a foreign ruling capitalist and all-powerful class, and therefore, this won't be prosperous at best, but exploitative at best. Actually, here's the thing. I'm a Zionist, believe it or not, and so like the supposedly self-hating Zionist that I am, I have a good middle solution between those committing a genocide and the ones being genocided. I'm a human being who thinks crime equals bad, and so my offer is to put every single war criminal in front of the ICC from both sides, and including the soldiers and militants, because why not? I think that can be fair if the trial is fair. Does that sound good to everyone? I'm sure it's only one specific country that would have an issue with this. Before I drop my mic for the day, check out my Patreon and support me there. That way I can get German eyes to see this as well. And that unfortunately necessitates hiring people. Which leads me to my point that if you are a German, hit me up on my Discord community so we can see if we can make a community effort for this. Joining my Patreon also gives you plenty of benefits like exclusive content, previews, higher degree of influence on my work, shoutouts, bloopers, and a few other things. One last thing though, I want to guarantee you that I am in fact a Zionist. And quote me on that and share it. And so as the Zionist that I am, I plan to highlight the incredible atrocities that befell those on my side in due time. But out of complete fairness, I like to treat violence equally. And I like to move from present to past chronologically. In short, I have to do about 100 videos like this before I get to criticizing Hamas. Now going down to 99.